Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Wednesday show. Hope everybody's doing well as we get this thing started. If you've been watching all week, we have been breaking down the free agency classes and who the Bucs might go after, starting with the defensive side, because that's where the Bucs are going to attack most this offseason. So safeties on Monday, cornerbacks yesterday, and today we'll talk about some available inside linebackers. We'll also talk about Chris Godwin and his contract update, and the NFL, which includes the Bucs. They have a new salary cap for the 2025 season, which plays a factor into this too. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me, returning to the show, is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR, Scott Reynolds. Hello, Scott. How are we doing?
Doing good. Happy to talk free agency with you guys. And linebacker is a position that this team definitely needs. Coverage was a problem last year, even for Lavonte David, who at age 34 still had a good year. Still welcome him back with open arms in Tampa Bay, but not the coverage player he used to be, right? And little did we know, Matt, back in week 4, how much that injury to SirVocea Dennis would play into things, because SirVocea Dennis, in a very small sample size, really was quite good and looked to be in that Washington game, the Detroit game, then the Broncos game, got injured in the Eagles game in week 4. Looked like he was going to take KJ Britt's starting job, because the snaps, and you do the snap counts every week for Pewter Report.
Yeah.
The snap counts were going in his favor. But as it turns out, he got injured, had that shoulder surgery. Tells me it's all fixed and all repaired now. He is good to go. That this was an injury that he had actually back in college. Didn't have surgery prior to the draft. Probably should have had surgery after his first season, but didn't want to disrupt his growth in the offseason and the OTAs heading into year 2, which was last year for him. Understandable, but that injury came back to bite him and the Buccaneers, because without SirVocea Dennis, this team really had a downward decline in the inside linebacker position. Started off with KJ Britt and Lavonte David, and then ended up with J.J. Russell starting opposite Lavonte David. J.J. probably should be back. He's a restricted free agent. I think you bring him back for depth and to compete for a 53-man roster spot. So right now, though, Matt, looking at this roster, SirVocea Dennis, obviously under contract, 2 more years, he's really kind of penciled in as one of those starters, whether it's at the Mike position or the Mo position, which is that money backer spot that Levante David plays.
This linebacker situation for the Bucs is a very interesting one, because I do agree, like, J.J. Russell should be back for like depth purposes, but I don't think anyone's like, hey, J.J. Russell, starter 2025, like, lock it in. Yeah. Same with like Deion Jones, who's on the older side. And why I find it so intriguing is, sure, the Bucs need to improve at corner and safety and edge rusher, and we'll continue to talk about that up until free agency starts, and even with the draft too, depending on what Tampa Bay does. But at the same time, inside linebacker, when it's all said and done, might have the most revamped room. But also, I find it the position, just seeing who's available at other positions, where this might be the spot where the Bucs kind of go a little bit more for the bargain hunting route and make the splash plays somewhere else, whether it's at safety or edge rusher. So that's what makes this so interesting. Yeah. And they should definitely, without a doubt, flood the linebacker position, because we don't know if Lavonte David's going to be back, but even if Lavonte David does return, okay, you're kind of hanging on year by year by year with Lavonte David. That's what makes some of these candidates interesting too, because do you want to go for an aging veteran? Hey, this is Lavonte David's replacement. I'm using this in quotation for those listening on audio. And it's like, okay, what, you're going to sign like a 34-year-old guy instead and have him for a year and then start this process all over? I don't think that's the best route. So I think this will be a little bit more of a value signing for the Bucs, where obviously they also address it in the draft.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And when you look at Lavonte David, Matt, it's important to understand he just turned 35, right? So he's yet to play it down at age 35, right? And so when does football season start? Well, in earnest, it starts in July, when you and I are sweating our asses off out there at training camp in late July and early August, right? That's really where the wear and tear, the day in, day out, the heat, the humidity kind of wears you down, right? And you're 15 or so years younger than I am. I'm feeling the heat and humidity more than you are. I remember what it was like when I was your age. I remember what it was like when I was Adam Slobon's age, right? Like in my early 20s, starting off covering this team 30 years ago. And the heat, the humidity, it just affects you differently. And so the Levante David that this team signs in, let's say, March, should he decide to come back for one more year and the team agree to sign him, well, that Levante in March is going to be different than the Levante David in, say, August. And that Levante David in August is going to be different than the one that's going to be playing in November, right? At some point in time, the wheels are going to fall off the wagon. Not just with Levante, with any NFL player. It happens at different ages. For Tom Brady, it's 43, right? For Lavonte David, you hope it's 36, not 35 if you re-sign him. But you don't know when that is. I'm with you, Matt. Even if you re-sign Lavonte David, flood the position. You have to assume, if you're Tampa Bay, that you are going to get a Lavonte David on the decline this year, and you got to cross your fingers that you're wrong and that he actually has another great year wire to wire left in him, or that he could even play better than he did last year. But you can't count on that. You can't expect that. So you need that safety net. It can't just be SirVocea Dennis, because as we found out last year, this team felt comfortable with Levante, with KJ Britt, and with SirVocea Dennis. And then when SirVocea was removed from the equation, now you're scrambling. Now KJ Britt gets hurt. You got JJ Russell. You got Vi Jones. You're bringing Antonio Greer up in the practice squad, who hasn't played it down in the NFL. You're scrambling. So Tampa Bay has got to flood this position through the draft with young players and through free agency. And we'll see. You can't even count on Deion Jones being a factor at age 30, even though he showed some glimpses in limited playing time last year.
And I'm a fan of SirVocea Dennis. I think his work when he's been available has been pretty solid. I enjoy what he's done in Tampa Bay, but he can't be relied on. I get it that he had shoulder surgery, but it wasn't just the shoulder that impacted him his rookie season, and he wasn't even getting playing time. So you're kind of talking about Levante, who I want back, but should be a platoon guy at this point. And it's a tricky situation, right? Because he is a legacy guy. You know, he's going to be up in the Bucs Ring of Honor. You don't want to like keep trotting him out and being like, hey, look, here's Levante, as the team is like suffering heavily on the defensive side. But you also want to show him that respect. And SirVocea Dennis, at this point of his early career, is a platoon player. He's got to prove that he can play a whole season and play every single down. Because we went into last season, media, the Bucs, everyone went in next season being like, wow, they have their solution with KJ Britt. And it turned out that the season before, when he started late at the end of the year, that was an anomaly. And could that be the case with KJ Britt? I hope not, but it's certainly something that you have to factor. So an aging Lavonte David, and we don't even know if he's going to be back, but outside of SirVocea Dennis, that's why you got to go free agent. You got to go, probably not day one, but I wouldn't hate if the Bucs drafted
by day 3, right? You better have a linebacker, right? So
yes,
it's first round, second round, third round. You better have another linebacker. You want to spend a late
pick on an inside linebacker after already getting one?
Yeah,
I'm fine with that too, because you need at all the other positions, even though like outside linebacker, there's been issues. You know, you got Yaya for a while. You know, you have Kalijah Cansey for a while. Same with Winfield, and Zion's going into a contract year, but I'd be surprised if he ends up somewhere else just based on what he's done for this team so far. Inside linebacker, besides SirVocea Dennis, they have no long-term answers. And we don't even know if Dennis is a long-term answer just based on his availability.
Yeah, no, all of that is well said. Totally agree. The other thing I'll add to this too is when you look at the Eagles, right? They had Nakobe Dean, who was I think a third-round pick out of Georgia. He was their starting inside linebacker. You felt pretty good about him. They ended up signing 3 linebackers in free agency. 3. Our good pal Devin White was one of those players. They signed some guy named Zach Bond from New Orleans, who was really an edge rusher for the New Orleans Saints. He was kind of like an outside linebacker, edge rusher type. They moved him to inside, and lo and behold, he became an all-pro player. He was the Eagles' equivalent of Shaq Barrett in 2019 for the Buccaneers. He was kind of like a nondescript free agent signing. And when I say nondescript, Shaq Barrett got a 1-year, $5 million deal. Zach Bond last year got a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And like Shaq Barrett blew up in 2019 with 19.5 sacks in his first Pro Bowl season, led the Bucs, led the NFL in sacks that year, set a Tampa Bay franchise single-season record, breaking Warren Sapp's record with sacks. That's the type of season Zach Bond had. Of course, he had that interception in the Super Bowl, along with being the leading tackler for the Eagles. But it wasn't just him and Devin White. They also signed another linebacker, Oren Burks, 30 years old, as a backup. And Oren Burks, he was signed to a 1-year prove-it deal like Zach Bond, but for even less, $1.125 million. So what happened? Devin White was actually getting more money than either Zach Bond or Oren Burks, but he didn't pan out. Nakobe Dean ended up going on injured reserve for the year. So the two guys signed on prove-it deals, 1-year prove-it deals on the cheap, ended up being the starting inside linebackers for the second half of the season, throughout the playoffs, and into the Super Bowl, and helped Philadelphia win a Super Bowl. And so I know a lot of fans want to see the big splash. They want to see the big name. And I think there's going to be maybe one or two of those. But Jason Light has had too much success, and the Eagles have had too much success. We've talked about it last week, how Bryce Huff was the big free agent splash that they had at defensive end, coming from the Jets with a 10-sack resume the year prior. $17 million. He was such a bust, 2.5 sacks, didn't even suit up in the preseason or the postseason, didn't even suit up for the Super Bowl. He was inactive. So it just goes to show you, sometimes you can't buy good players. Sometimes you hit in free agency. A lot of times you don't when it's the big spending deals. And I think you're right. I think this team will probably go with a more conservative approach with the linebacker position, despite the fact it's a very important position in Todd Bowles' defense.
And Zach Bond specifically, like 2 weeks ago, we did a roundtable, or maybe it was last week, about like what could the Bucs learn from the Eagles, or like who do you want the Bucs to sign? I know that was one this week, but I remember writing about Zach Bond, and maybe I was drinking the Kool-Aid of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl a little bit, and I still think he could be a very good player. But the Bryce Huff situation, I think, is a really good example of sometimes you work best based on the product of your environment. Bryce Huff specifically was just a pass rushing specialist.
Right.
Bond, and you see some other free, like Josh McCown comes to mind as well. Like he had the 1 or 2 good seasons, and then he got a big contract because of it. Matt Flynn back in the day, he had one good start in week 18 or 17 with the Packers and got a big deal from Seattle. I'm not saying Zach Bond is one of those guys by any means, but he signed a 1-year prove-it deal. Now, he proved it, but was it because he was the product of a lot of great talent that was still healthy playing for the Philadelphia Eagles and Vic Fangio's system specifically, or was it just that he moved to inside linebacker and that changed everything? Because that's an argument for him, is the fact that, hey, now I'm playing inside linebacker. I'm a completely different player. You know it works in Philadelphia, but Philadelphia runs a different type of defense than what Todd Bowles runs. So I'm a little more bullish on Zach Bond now than I was like a week ago, based on kind of the one-hit wonder type of thing. Now, it clearly worked with Shaq Barrett, but Shaq proved it in Tampa already. He didn't have a big year with another team after leaving the Broncos and then coming to Tampa. So it's a little bit different, but it's something that certainly entered my mind when kind of thinking about how the Bucs will approach it this offseason.
Exactly. Still more linebacker talk to get to, but there is some current news we need to address when it comes to Chris Godwin and the Bucs salary cap and how those two intersect. So let's kind of set the table for the Chris Godwin discussion, Matt. The NFL came out with the official salary cap numbers today.
They did. It was announced about an hour and a half ago from Dan Graziano of ESPN. The NFL had informed all 32 NFL teams about what the salary cap range will be this year, and all somewhere in between $277.5 million to $281.5 million. Last year's salary cap was $255.4. So overall, this is pretty good. I mean, it's good news regardless, because every team is going to get more cap room. That's an increase depending on where it lands. This could be an increase of more than $22 million, 22.1 at the minimum and 26.1 at the maximum, with an increase from last season. So it's certainly important for the Bucs, who now have a little more room to maneuver.
Yeah.
I mean, they were going to be under regardless, just because of the dead cap money that they still have to pay to Shaq Barrett and Ryan Jensen.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
and Chris Godwin.
Well, that's the point I was going to get to next. It's like they do have a little bit of room. The Godwin thing, over $18 million, but the news that broke last night after we were done with the Pewter Report podcast is that Godwin and the Bucs have agreed to push the date of when the void would hit on his contract. It was supposed to hit tomorrow on February 20th. They decided to move that back to March, right when the start of the new league year is supposed to begin on March 14th. So what does that mean? It gives the Bucs more time to have conversations with Chris Godwin about a contract extension, which certainly keeps Chris Godwin in Tampa Bay, and it actually saves the Bucs some money. So great news last night, good news today with some more cap room for Tampa Bay, and thrilling news when it comes to the likelihood of Chris Godwin returning to the Bucs.
That's right. I just checked overthecap.com. We at Pewter Report use that a little bit more than SpotTrack in terms of salary cap information and all of that. And as of right now, they have the Buccaneers, because each team is different. They set the league number, right? But then each team has different rollover amounts from the previous year. The Buccaneers roll over some salary cap. So right now, as of 4:20 here on Wednesday, they have the Bucs salary cap at $286.1 million roughly. And that increases the Bucs cap space to $8.4 million. So the good news is they don't have to make any cap moves. They're already cap compliant right now. They're not one of these teams that has to cut players or restructure deals just to become cap compliant. That's already happened. So Tampa Bay, when you look at the top 51, which is really what is, which is what you look at, and I take that back. The total cap liabilities, they have $286.1 million in terms of cap expenditure. So that's how much they already have there. You only count the top 51 in the off season, and so they have Tampa Bay. They have $245.6 million worth of cap money spent so far. So again, $8.4 million as of right now. That's good news for the Buccaneers because they don't have to do any cutting and slashing, et cetera. Now, of course, they will in time, but you have to remember Jason Light and Mike Greenberg, Jackie Davidson, they will cut as needed. They'll cut as they go. So they're not going to sit there and do a bunch of restructures or cut a bunch of players and all of a sudden just create $30 to $40 million of cap space and then start spending it. That's not how they operate. As they need cap room, they will restructure a deal here, make a cut there, and they'll do that throughout free agency. So the good news is they're not like the Saints, who are $47 million below the cap right now, I should say, or above the cap. They have $47.1 million worth of cap cutting that needs to be done prior to March 12th just to become cap compliant. And that means if they cut or restructure, Matt, $47.1 million worth of cap room, then guess what? They're at zero. That means they have no money to spend. Yeah. So if they want to spend in free agency, they're going to have to cut way more than $47.1 million to restructure. The Saints are basically doomed this offseason. Finally kicking the can down the road has caught up to them, but the Bucs are in good shape right now. And as Josh Capo has pointed out, numerous stories and Pewter Report podcast appearances, they can create $30, $40, $50 million worth of cap room easy by doing some restructures to some of their bigger players.
Yeah, shout out to Josh. I highly recommend for everybody to check out one of his video series. Check them all out, but one specifically about the salary cap breakdown, because it goes into a lot of detail about this is where they are. If they want to get to here, this is how they have to do it. And here's who's eligible for a contract extension. A lot of talk about the 2022 draft class with Cade Otton and Luke Gedeke specifically, who we've spoken about, potentially Zion McCollum. They could extend those guys or give them an extension. They could extend Mike Evans. They could restructure the contracts of Baker Mayfield, but probably more likely Tristan Wirfs
Vita Vea.
And Vita Vea
if they want to extend him.
Yeah, or Antoine Winfield Jr. So
yeah.
There's a lot of like deep dives into what they can do, how they can get a good number. And they're in a good spot right now, but they're not going to go into free agency with only $8.5 million. They're not going to be able to get the big time splashes that they want. So more moves will be coming, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense to dig in already and cut this player or restructure that contract if you don't need to. It's like, I don't know, if you have a couple of different plans, why would you commit to one plan when the person you're talking to doesn't have to know that you have another plan at the moment? And it's like, oh, I just got invited to a VIP concert, whatever, with backstage pass. Like, I'm going to go take that instead of like, I already committed to, my third cousin's birthday.
It's
a little bit like that. Like, why restructure Baker Mayfield if you don't have to?
If you don't have to, exactly.
You can go about it a different way. So.
Yeah, because it does kick the can down the road. There are some repercussions. It pushes that bonus money that can accelerate, as we're seeing with Chris Godwin with that $18 million. That's going to accelerate, but they'll have some time with an extension to get that deal done. Now, as I've said, and Pewter Report has maintained, I think, when did I say it? Back in November.
Yeah,
they're going to re-sign Chris Godwin. Like it's going to happen. I did a Pewter Pulse topic on this today. It doesn't mean that Chris Godwin's not going to have suitors. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's not going to be, a little bit of angst and consternation in terms of getting this deal done. Just because Chris Godwin's a good player, and you want other teams to be after your players, that means they're good. So, but will he go to Jacksonville? Will he go to the Raiders? And of course, those are two teams that could desperately use Chris. They need a big time wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence in terms of Liam Cohen's offense. And out there in Las Vegas, they don't even have a quarterback. I mean, much less a big time receiver. They traded away Davante Adams. So they need a quarterback. And then for that quarterback, whether they draft one or sign one in free agency, they need some receivers. And with $92 million worth of cap space, the Raiders can overpay and get pretty much anybody they want in free agency. They're going to have to open up the checkbook. I don't know that that's John Spytek's style, though, coming from Tampa Bay, but those are two possible suitors that could be after Chris Godwin just because of the fact that Liam Cohen saw how well he thrived in his offense in Tampa Bay last year. And John Spytek was one of the guys that drafted Chris Godwin. Spytek joined in 2016. They drafted Chris Godwin in 2017 in the third round. And both of those guys, Spytek and Liam Cohen, have a little bit of additional insight because they've seen how Chris Godwin has attacked the rehab process. They have some insight into how far along he was. They both were in the building, through the middle of January. So they have a little bit of extra insight that maybe other teams don't have in terms of how well Godwin's rehab is progressing. He's expected to make a full recovery. But we'll see. At the end of the day, I think Tampa Bay, gets the deal done with Godwin. But will their interest drive the price up a little bit? That's something I talk about in the Pewter Pulse. I dropped the link in the chat. Please feel free to check it out.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, obviously, with the ties to former Bucs people and personnel. The Commanders, I'm not sure what their cap situation is, but considering that the Commanders are looking for a second wide receiver, and Jaden Daniels is the quarterback, and Chris and his wife are from the Delaware area in the Northeast, like that would concern me a little bit. But at the end of the day, Chris, much like Mike, they're different when it comes to being a wide receiver. I mean that in a good way. It's not about just taking the biggest money grab. Still, certainly should get his money's worth, and as Josh Capo kind of projects, around 19 to 20 million per year. Certainly deserves to get that type of money if he can bounce back. But this is a situation that the Bucs have been in before with Chris Godwin, and I think that's kind of an advantage for Tampa Bay, no doubt about it.
Yep. Ben Bredesen getting some love here. We'll talk linebacker in just a minute, but we have a couple of super chats to get to as well. But just seeing the Ben Bredesen, the guard, really behind Chris Godwin, this is a far cry from what it was last year, Matt, when it was almost like whack-a-mole, right? I mean, you could see Jason Light, Jackie Davidson, Mike Greenberg, like all passing around the Tums bottle and or the Alka-Seltzer bottle Pepto-Bismol, name your antacid, right? And chugging from it just to get through free agency, because it was like a whack-a-mole situation. You have Baker Mayfield over here, Antoine Winfield Jr. over here, Mike Evans over here, Lavonte David over here, Chase McLaughlin here. You had to get a deal done for Tristan Wirfs, right? So many free agents last year, big primetime names. This season, a little bit more of a relaxed environment, a little bit more of a singular focus on Chris Godwin first, then really Ben Bredeson and Levante David on that second tier. And really it's about whether Levante David wants to play or not. We know Ben Bredeson does. He had a great year in Tampa, but will that end up upping the ante a little bit for the Bucs veteran right guard? We'll see. That was one of the questions we had here from Henry Gigante, $4.99 super chat, Pewter Report TV channel member, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Says, if Ben Bredeson walks in free agency, do you see the Bucs going offensive line in the first round or promoting Elijah Klein? Thank you for the outstanding offseason coverage. We appreciate it,
Thank you, Henry. Yeah.
I think both could happen. They're going to, not that they would go in the first round, but Jason Light, one thing we do know is Jason Light loves building in the trenches, no matter what, even if they are all set and good to go with the starting five, which they wouldn't be in this case with Ben Bredeson. So it would certainly be a situation where if they can't get Bredeson back, maybe it's not a first-round pick. I know we like the North Dakota State offensive
Raise
line.
a bill.
Yes, Bell that we saw at the Senior Bowl. It could be him, but if it's not, the Bucs could still go an earlier draft pick, maybe in the second or third round, and put him in a competition with Elijah Klein, who showed some versatility last year, who will have a whole season under his belt, seeing what's up with this Bucs offensive line. That was very, very successful. So it could certainly be a competition if Ben Bredeson is not back with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because I typically what Jason Light, Mike Greenberg will do is they'll assign a value, and they'll kind of have like a little line, like we're not going to cross this, right? And maybe that number, is $5 million, maybe it's 5.5, maybe it's 6. I don't know what that number is for Ben Bredeson in terms of that. You probably want him back on a 1-year deal. Yeah. And you want to give him a raise. He made $3 million last year. I think you give him a 25% raise, and you bump him up to $4 million. And the important thing is they're going to lose Robert Hainsey this offseason. And Ben Bredeson does give you some coverage because he has played center as well as guard. And so you put him in the mix at the guard position. You draft another interior offensive lineman that can play center or guard. You have Elijah Klein in the mix. That way your bases are kind of covered a little bit. And I like that. And listen, if Gray Zabel is there for North Dakota State, we know Jason Light likes under, I don't say like under scouted, but he's not afraid of taking small school offensive linemen. Alex Kappa from Humboldt State, Ellie Marpet from Hobart College, Cody Malk from North Dakota State. You got Central Michigan's Luke Gedeke. These are not SEC schools, right? But he has made all those guys into really good offensive linemen. He's identified that they're talent, got them in here. The coaches coach them up, and they become superstars. So I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if they're sitting there at 19 and there's not an edge rusher who's worth that particular spot. Maybe you can't trade down. There's not a cornerback worth that spot. Too early for a linebacker. If Gray Zabel is there from North Dakota State, it's a little tempting to sit there and say, we're going to plug him in, and I'm going to have a guy with essentially a 5-year contract because the 5th-year option being a first-rounder.
Yeah.
Tristan Wirfs is under contract for the next multiple years. We're going to extend Luke Gedeke. You've got 3 more years of contract at your center position plus a 5th-year option with Graham Barton. Cody Malk will have 2 more years left in his deal. You're solidifying your offensive line for at least the next 2 years, if not 3. And there's something very tempting about that. When you have a $100 million quarterback, when you're running the ball as well as you do, ask Patrick Mahomes, ask the Kansas City Chiefs how valuable, not just good, but great offensive linemen are. When you get to the Super Bowl, you're going up against great pass rushers. You need a great offensive line. And the Bucs had a great one when they won the Super Bowl. And so it wouldn't be ideal because of all the needs on defense. Yeah. And maybe they address linebacker in free agency. Maybe they address edge in free agency. And you don't feel as bad about it. But you can't rule that out. If there is a quality offensive lineman that can start at left guard and they don't get Ben Bredesen back for the price that they want, don't rule it out.
No doubt about it. And last season was the first time really since Ali Marpet retired where it felt like the Bucs finally had at least a short-term answer at left guard just based on some of the other things. But it's also important for the Bucs. I completely agree. Like, obviously, defense is going to get a lot of the attention this offseason just based on the struggles they had last year. But that does not mean that the Bucs should turn a blind eye to what they have on the offense as well, or what they need to improve on the offense, because it's already pretty damn good and will be that much better.
There's nothing wrong with strengthening your strengths, with going from great to excellent. There's nothing wrong with that.
Because it's super important that the regular season is a lot more about the offense. And then the postseason is about who can get those stops on defense. Look at what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl, and there's a lot of other examples as well. So why not figure out your offensive line situation, figure out what you have as backups too, because Klein for one more season as a backup, I think is pretty good. If they can re-sign Justin School or Schoolie, as they all like to call him, I think that's a quality backup who at the Detroit game, we were like, oh my goodness, no. But, as the season went on, he proved to be very, very important for this team.
Absolutely.
He was out for a little bit and Tristan Wirfs got banged up here and there. So they got it in the trenches. And another thing the Bucs have, at least on the offensive side, is the appeal of, they had it with Tom Brady, like, oh my God, all these guys are going to want to come to Tampa and play with Tom Brady. They have it now. If you're a free agent left guard, you want to come and play on this offensive line with Bucky Irving and these receivers and all of these guys. The Bucs didn't have that in years past, so they might be able to acquire a little bit of a better offensive lineman than in other seasons based on what Tampa Bay did in the running game last year.
That's right. Speaking of acquiring, I have acquired some of the new Celsius flavors, the retro vibe, which tastes like sherbet. I mean, we're talking like lime, orange, raspberry sherbet. This is spot on. I don't know how they do it. Those scientists at Celsius, they make this thing taste just like a spoonful of sherbet every time you take a sip. Then the Playa vibe, or as we call it, the Playa vibe. Playa, check this out. It's a pina colada flavored Celsius. These are some of the new flavors you can get. Got these at Nutrition Smart here in Wesley Chapel, but they also have an exclusive grape essentials, grape slush, which is the new essentials flavor. That's exclusively at 7-Eleven for a bit. So they're coming out with new flavors all the time.
That's right. Make sure you try them all out because you never know which one you're going to love the most. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, maybe you're on vacation, maybe you're on a trip somewhere different than where your home is, for example. We're going to Indianapolis next week for the Combine. If you have to find a Celsius or need to find a Celsius, go to the store locator on the Celsius website, punch in your address. They'll tell you the closest place you could pick one up could be a Publix, a Walmart, a Stop and Shop, or your bodega. And after you know that you want Celsius in bulk, because you heard us talk about all the fantastic flavors they have, you can purchase it in bulk over on Amazon and with the subscribe and save and have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. It's completely at your leisure. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius Energy Drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com.
Yeah. You know who else is essential over in our neck of the woods? Our Pewter Platinum members. That's right. Yeah. Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, Zach Jarvis, Hezo 813, Ash Fishbowl, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, and Zap Brannigan. Thank you so much for your support. We're still working on a date. It will be after free agency, after we get back from the Bucs cruise, which is coming up March 7th through 10th, right when we get back from Indy. We're going cruising. So it's going to be after that. We're trying to get someone from the Bucs brass. I'm not going to name names right now. Someone from the Bucs brass and a player. We're trying to nail those down. It is the off season. It's a little tougher to do that, but we don't want to like advertise it without their, their blessing and their commitment and all of that stuff. So we're still working on it for our Pewter Platinum members. It will be here in Tampa. It will be probably at Walk-Ons as well. So Walk-Ons is excited to have us there as well. So a little bit of house cleaning to do as well. Want to make sure that if you have yet to become a Pewter Report TV channel member, you can do so by clicking the join button on Pewter Report TV. It's our YouTube channel. And you can find the the subscription level that's right for you. We've got the Pewter People membership at $3.99 a month, the Pewter Pro membership at $6.99. You can become a Pewter Premier member for $9.99 and a Pewter Platinum member for $24.99. You've got different perks at every level, and all the money goes towards really our travel expenses. That's where we're really using it, because in the off season, as you know, we go to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. We also go to the Indianapolis Scouting Combine, the NFL Scouting Combine there in Indy. We're there all week from Monday through Saturday. And then we're going to be at the NFL annual meeting, which used to be called the NFL Owners Meeting. And that's going to be happening in March too. So we're doing all this for you guys to get you the scoop and the information you want and crave about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so there's different ways you can support us at Pewter Report. And if you own a business, or maybe you're in marketing a certain business and you want to help your business score new customers, well, then advertise with us. You can advertise on the Pewter Report podcast, pewterreport.com. We have social media channels that combine for over 110,000 followers. Sponsorship opportunities are available. Email me at sr@pewterreport.com. That's sr@pewterreport.com. We'll have a conversation with you about it. And we'd love to have your business partnered with us, and we can help drive some more customers your way. Matt, we also have got a couple of other shows lined up for this week, and then a very special one next Tuesday. Let's talk about that. We're going to do linebackers today. Tomorrow is Bucs free agent options, and even though Trey Hendrickson is not a free agent option, and the Bengals have said they want to re-sign him, he might be available for procurement via trade. So the edge rushers will be tomorrow, and then on Friday, Matt and I, for our Pewter Insiders, our Pewter Platinum and Premier members, will be doing our Pewter Insider bonus podcast on Friday at 1:30. The Bucs need to go all in on 2025. Matt and I will talk about how Jason Light and Joe Lazier and others can get this team going in the right direction, which is towards the Super Bowl. And then no show on Monday. We'll be traveling to Indy on Monday, but we will have a show Tuesday evening in Indy. We'll be talking to Jason Light and Todd Bowles on that Tuesday, next Tuesday. We'll be doing a press conference reaction show to all of the news that breaks in Indy, live from Indianapolis.
Yeah, a lot of content coming up. Free agency is right around the corner. So that's why we're focusing on it this week, because obviously our attention will be on the draft at the Combine the following week. So All your stuff can be found right at pewterreport.com and Pewter Report TV.
Exactly. As Low County Pirate says, Celsius Essentials where it's at. And MSM, the Barron Way, making me thirsty. Yes, they're good. I start every morning with the Celsius, and I think you should too. They're absolutely amazing when it comes to energy. Speaking of energy, Dre Greenlaw is one of those players. He's featured on the front of today's Pewter Report podcast on the graphic. One of those players that when this guy is healthy, he is an Energizer bunny. The Bucs really liked him coming out of Arkansas. It was a 5th-round pick years ago from San Francisco, and he tore his Achilles right before the Super Bowl. Matter of fact, I think it was like when they were coming out of the tunnel, right, a couple years ago, and then he basically was almost lost for all of last year.
Yeah,
fantastic coverage linebacker, really good in space, and when you're looking at coverage ability, and that's an area where, boy, the Buccaneers really were awful in coverage last year. This guy has really got it going on in terms of his coverage ability. Dre Greenlaw is the number 1 projected linebacker via Pro Football Focus. And the coverage grade is the reason why. 82.6 and 79.5 over the past 2 seasons. Matt, that's like Buccaneer defensive back grades.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how good he is in coverage. Was limited to just 2 games last year as he was coming back from that Achilles, and by the time he got back, the 49ers were having a down season, so they just said, hey, get your feet wet and get ready for 2025. They'd love to have him back, but they've got some cap issues of their own, some other players they got to sign, and he might be a guy that they just don't have enough room for cap-wise.
That is true. Obviously, the injury is kind of a bit of a dark cloud when it comes to this, because as we've seen with Chris Godwin, as we've seen with a lot of players, Kirk Cousins in the division last season for the Bucs, not everybody returns from a serious, significant injury like a torn Achilles or a torn ACL in Chris Godwin's case. Not everybody returns back the same type of way. Now, at least whoever gets Dre Greenlaw next has the benefit of it's technically sort of 2 years since he really had the injury. But when he's healthy, he checks off every single box that Tampa Bay wants. I mean, from 2022, he had 127 combined tackles. 2023, 120 combined tackles. In those games as well, he played 15 games a season, so relatively pretty healthy. 2020, the end of 2023 in the Super Bowl, that injury was very, very important. So I'm curious, like there's going to be interest in him, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how many teams are going to be willing to shell out the big money because of the big injury as well. There's no doubt when he's healthy, he should be up there with his teammate, Fred Warner, as one of the highest paid inside linebackers in the league. But you're not paying for what he did. You're paying for what you expect him to be, what you want him to be. And I don't know with that injury is how much teams will have precaution because of it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, too, about Dre Greenlaw is like Pro Football Focus, and I think Josh Capo, our own capologist, kind of says the same thing. Because of the fact that he is no spring chicken anymore. I mean, he's not old. He's 27. He'll be 28 in May. So he'll be 28 when he plays this season. He will probably get a 1-year prove-it deal just because coming off that Achilles, only played in 2 games. So he really didn't play much at all last year. So you have to he has to prove that he can play and hold up. And not just that, but get back to that player that he was before. That's the important thing. Like Shaq Barrett couldn't do that. And Shaq was a couple years older, but Shaq Barrett, once that Achilles injury happened, it robbed him of some of that speed. We saw with O.J. Howard during 2020. Towards Achilles against the Chargers, was never the same player. So that is one of those instances where with that injury, there's a little bit of buyer beware. You want to do a 1-year deal. Pro Football Focus has him as a 1-year, $6 million kind of guy, even though he is the highest rated linebacker. And that's really saying something because the next guy on their list, and they have Dre Greenlaw as the number 18 free agent overall, including all positions. The next linebacker on the list is the 34th overall free agent. That's Kansas City's Nick Bolton. Now, he's a little bit younger. He'll be 25 this year. But they have him getting a 4-year deal with a $15 million average. That's a 4-year, $60 million deal, right?
Yeah.
But there's no injury concern there. He's won Super Bowls with the Chiefs. He's more durable. He's younger. He's got more upside, things like that. But if you're looking at getting a player and not putting all your eggs in one basket, if it doesn't work out, you don't lose a lot of money. Dre Greenlaw might be your guy because if he gets back to that level, he'll be an absolute steal.
1 year, $6 million. Sign him right away, and don't let him leave the room. The way that teams, when they're trying to hire a new coach or a new coordinator or whatever, when you don't want them to leave, I would try to get him to sign that as soon as possible. If it's 1 year, $6 million, because if it doesn't work out, then whatever, you're fine. You can move on from it after that season. That's why, guys like Bolton and, Ernest Jones, like Bolton, it's interesting with the Chiefs, right? Because we've seen with like L'Jarius Sneed, even like Tyreek Hill a couple of seasons ago, they love having their guys, but once they reach a certain price threshold, they're like, thanks, we got Patrick Mahomes. We'll find other ways to win and keep going back to the Super Bowl. And we see time and time again, even though the Bucs are still able to re-sign their guys after the 2020 season, for a lot of other teams, once you reach the Super Bowl or have success the way the Chiefs have or the Eagles just did, those guys end up taking big deals in other places because teams will overpay because it's like, well, he was successful there. He should be successful here. So I don't know with Bolton, the Chiefs usually let those guys go, but would this be the exception to it? I don't know if the Bucs want to pay $15 million a year over 4 seasons for, this position just yet when you can find cheaper options or go through the draft and maybe you find a starter for maybe not the same production right away. But again, I keep coming back to inside linebacker, in my opinion, for the Bucs is going to be more of the bargain, cheaper side versus the splash that you could get at edge rusher and other positions.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Chiefs, Leo Cheval, or Chanel, Drew Tranquil, those are the other linebackers they have in addition to Bolton. But Bolton's their captain. He is their quarterback of their defense. As long as Spags is there in Kansas City, I think he's going to stand on the table, go to Andy Reid and say, no, we have to get this guy back, right? We have to. He is that essential. And he's played well, and I think he's deserved the raise. I would be surprised if he gets out of Kansas City. Played at Missouri just down the road. So I don't know that he is going to be an option in free agency. And maybe Dre Greenlaw doesn't get out of San Francisco. We'll see. The other free agents to consider, obviously, Lavonte David, one of those. Bobby Wagner.
I don't think they're going to place Levante with Bobby Wagner.
Well, exactly. They're not going to. Bobby Wagner, PFF loves him. I mean, he had like an 88.3 grade last year. Still a good player, but I don't think he's that good of a player. Matter of fact, the interesting thing is PFF gave him a grade of 88.3, and maybe it's because of the age, because he will be 35 this year. Levante is a little bit older. But they have Bobby Wagner getting a 1-year, $5 million contract. So It just goes to show you that the PFF grades and the market don't always align here. The Buccaneers, Lavonte David, they have Levante getting a 1-year, $6.5 million deal in free agency, whether it's in Tampa or somebody else. But a couple of the other names are interesting. We talked about Zach Bond. He's going to cash in.
Yeah, he
is 28 years old. Projected to get a 3-year, $19.3 million deal, which that's not that bad. Ernest Jones is another name at age 25. He's kind of bounced between a couple of teams. Finished the year with Seattle last year. 3 years, $12 million deal. But I could see Tampa Bay going for a little bit of an under the radar kind of guy. Not necessarily an Eric Kendricks, because he's an older guy, almost 33. Who's going to get a 1-year, probably $4 million deal. But there's a couple of younger guys that are pretty interesting. Josh Capo has written about a couple of them. Tyrell Dotson, who was traded from the Bills to the Miami Dolphins. Interesting player because he is really good in coverage, leaves a little bit to be desired in run support. But this is a player, Matt, that when you talk about coverage deficiencies, and I don't think it's necessarily effort. It might just be some technique that needs to be cleaned up. But in run defense, he's okay. In coverage, he's exceptional.
Yeah, so Dotson, his season last year was a tale of two halves because he was actually on the Seahawks and got cut by Seattle. And then the Dolphins ended up picking him up with Miami. And remember, he played half the season with Miami. He ended up with 3 interceptions. So you're talking about a guy that had to come in, learn the system. Now, granted, one of them was off of the Cleveland Browns, who had a quarterback carousel. But regardless, an interception is an interception. He had an 82.9 pass coverage grade last year. 82.9.
Yeah.
The Bucs would have begged for
70,
20 points less than that,
right?
Based on what they did, and he dropped back 455 times. So this is a guy where, again, like, do you start him as a every down type of guy? I don't think he's going to be that expensive because he's kind of bounced around the league a little bit. He can continue to play in the state of Florida. Again, the Bucs, Dolphins, and Jaguars will have that advantage over a lot of teams in the NFL with the no state income tax. And again, we kind of said it with the Bucs offensive line, but I think it's very fair with the Bucs defensively and specifically at inside linebacker. If you're one of these guys like Dotson, like Jamie Sherwood, who's another young player on the Jets, you could be coming to a new team that has a defensive head coach. So if you keep winning, he's going to stay there. You don't have to worry about a new system and things like that. And you could be a starter for another, depending on your age, 5, 6, 7 years in the system if it all works out. So again, to me, that's way more beneficial than anything Miami is trying to convince him of re-signing right now. Miami has a lot more issues, like how much longer, how healthy can Tua stay? What's the offense going to look like if Tyreek Hill leaves? Their defense is kind of so-so. You have to deal with Josh Allen, and we'll see what happens with New England this year. So there are a lot more questions there than if you come to the Bucs. It's like, all right, you got Baker, you have a top 5 offense. You need to figure out the defense, but you're going to be part of that reason why the defense turns it around. So a lot of appeal to coming to the Bucs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it too is Tampa Bay has kind of crafted itself into a Super Bowl contender, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even though they all fell short of their goal last year, losing in the first round of the playoffs was not the plan, right? At the same time, though, when you look, Tampa Bay has been to the playoffs now 5 straight seasons, and they've won 4 straight division championships, and they're probably going to be the odds-on favorite to win it again. And so, having said that, if you are, kind of like middle age, right? You're 26, 27 years old, and you're on your second contract or maybe your third contract if you flamed out elsewhere. Maybe you're thinking, all right, let's get on a Super Bowl contender now. Let's try to get this thing rolling, and there's some real appeal there. And plus, the no state income tax doesn't necessarily work if you're competing against the Jaguars or the Dolphins, because both those teams have that as well. Yeah. Also, the Raiders and the Titans, because Tennessee and Nevada are also state income tax free states. But it does play, into that mix, and it might help Tampa Bay out there. Speaking of helping out, we have a company that we have partnered with that will absolutely help you out when it comes to your insurance, whether it's homeowners insurance, whether it's boaters insurance, business insurance, flood insurance, or even auto insurance. And unlike other agents, Briar Greaves Insurance, which is my insurance, and Mark Cook, the late great Pewter reporter, turned me on to Briar Greaves back in the day. Well, Briar Greaves Insurance, they have access to 90% of the auto carriers in Florida. So having an agent like Briar Greaves will ensure that you're getting the most competitive premium possible. No more wondering if you're getting the best deal, because you will know what everyone has to offer, including Geico now. That's right. Briar Greaves has just become an exclusive Geico agent as well. Only a handful of agents in Florida can make that claim. Geico is a great alternative for families with young drivers, high school, college-age kids, because there's some of the most expensive burdens on a parent's auto insurance in terms of costs. Briar Greaves Auto Insurance has been able to save families thousands on their insurance costs, and they can help you too. Briar Greaves also provides full coverage insurance for your antique car, your RV, your motorhome, and much more. Give them a call today and have them do the legwork for you, like my guy, John Greaves. He will go and look at all of the different car companies, the auto companies, and get the best insurance rates possible. And this is a free comprehensive market summary of auto insurance options just for you. It's free. So let Briar Greaves do the legwork. They'll provide you with the best carrier. For me and my family, happens to be Travelers, but it might be Geico for you. Visit Briar Greaves Insurance today. BriarGreaves.com. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S. Or call their office today at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. And tell them Pewter Report sent you.
Wanted to talk real quick about Jamie Sherwood, who Raymond mentioned. So he played with the Jets. He's 25 years old. I believe he'll be 25 when the season starts. Some positives and negatives about him. He's got a lot of tread on the tire, a lack of tread on the tire. Because last year was really his first year starting. He had played behind C.J. Mosley, but Mosley had dealt with a number of injuries. So he played in all 17 games and was a starter. Had 158 tackles.
Yeah.
That is a tackling machine. He's also started his career as a safety, but then moved over to inside linebacker as well. So those are some of the positives that he has, like starting experience, but not a lot of wear and tear on the body. That was the word I was looking for. And 158 tackles. Played in a 4-3 defense, though, and a defense that did not require a lot of blitzing, whether it was Robert Saleh, who got fired during the year. Jeff Ulbrich blitzed a little bit more, but not necessarily his forte. So not as much of a blitzer compared to some other guys who were available. He smoked Drake May on that play when the Bucs won that Thursday night game. So does have physicality. People say that he looks like a carbon copy of C.J. Mosley, who was a great linebacker, when he was healthy this season.
Right.
So, if the Bucs think that they can still get great production of him playing in a 3-4 defense, certainly the age and the fact that he's been not used that much in his career is appealing, especially at age 25, and had an overall grade of 73.8, which I believe came out to 35th among all inside linebackers. So as far as like a young player, pretty good option, won't necessarily break the bank. You have to worry about, obviously, the Jets wanting to re-sign him. But with them having a new defensive system with Aaron Glenn going there, who knows if he will be a part of that. But certainly a name to think about if he reaches free agency.
I believe he played at Auburn, and Pro Football Focus has him getting a 2-year deal worth $7.75 million on the average. And I mean, that's a reasonable price. That's nothing crazy. I think Levante David made more than that last year as an aging player. But that's certainly a reasonable price, about half of what Zach Bond will probably get in free agency as well. So definitely somebody that is kind of like one of those under the radar guys. We've seen Jason Light kind of get guys like Ben Bredesen. Who is he? Shaq Barrett. Who is he? Right. Some of these guys that Rob McCartney has been doing deep dives on and the pro personnel side of things. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see one of those types of moves. Dre Greenlaw is the bigger name, but comes with some risk. Jamie Sherwood might be that up and comer that this team takes a flyer on. Ryan Jensen was kind of that way too. 1-year starter for Baltimore, right? Played really well, and they took a chance on him and with a big contract, and that really worked out exceptionally well. Kind of like when you go to walk-ons, it always works out really well. No matter whether your team wins or loses, you're a winner when you go to walk-ons.
What an amazing comeback, Coach.
You're not kidding. I mean, we did lose the game badly, but coming to walk-ons afterward, the team got a much-needed win off the field.
Walk-ons for the win.
And you can win rewards with Walk-Ons Rewards. That's right. Download their app, Walk-Ons Rewards. It's free to download, free to use, and you get free mozzarella sticks on your next visit when you download it. So that's the cool thing, right? They're going to give you one of the best free appetizers of your life when you go there. And every time that you eat and drink at Walk-Ons, you earn points, and then you get free stuff. You get points, or I should say money taken off your bill. And you're going to get points when you try their wings, which are fantastic with the new Southern Bourbon sauce. You can earn 100 bonus points just for doing that at Walk-Ons. 3 locations to serve you in the Tampa Bay area. That is Midtown Tampa, down there by Matt, Wesley Chapel, my neck of the woods, and Lakeland. So make sure you get to Walk-Ons and watch maybe the hockey game tomorrow night. USA versus Canada, right? Let's do this.
Round 2.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Yes, that first one was awesome.
That was fantastic.
Yes. 3 fights in a matter of 9 seconds was
gotta love it.
Unbelievable. I believe, I don't know if we got to this. I can't.
We didn't get to it yet.
We've had so much fun, time flies. They kind of forget what you get to. But Bucs Basement, thanks for the $2 super chat, says, unlike the Rays, I expect the Bucs to spend. Yeah, I know there's a football show. I'm not a Rays fan, but obviously living in the area, you hear the chatter. Seems like their ownership is terrible. They're cheap. They don't even have a stadium right now, obviously, unfortunately, because of the hurricane. But it doesn't seem like they even want to get a new stadium. But for many that are Rays fans and Bucs fans, at least the Bucs can keep you sane during the season. And yes, they will be spending a little bit. So you have that to look forward to. Exactly. Speaking of looking forward to, just a quick reminder of what we have going on tomorrow, because we're not done yet, folks. There's still more free agency talk to be had. Looking at the edge rushers available, maybe via trade, maybe via free agency. Maybe the Bucs will go out and draft another one, but maybe they'll get a veteran because they've had more success doing that with Jason Light. Then on Friday's show for our Pewter Platinum and Premier members, our Pewter Insider at 1:30. Bucs need to go all in 2025. Do it, Jason. Do it, Joel. Do it, Brian. Do it, Darcy. Do it, Ed. And then on Tuesday, no Monday show, we're traveling to Indy, but on Tuesday, Jason Light, Todd Bowles press conference reaction live from Indianapolis. Well, the whole Pewter Report crew there, and minus Josh Capo. Josh can't make it, but we'll have everybody else there. Donnie Stange says, love Pewter Report, especially on my way to the bodega. Let's go. And one last comment here. I think it was a question. Let's get to it real quick. Nathan Elliott, Pewter Report, going to be on the Buccaneer fan cruise? Yes. Myself, Matt Matera, Adam Slice, Levon will be the Pewter Report representatives. So we'll see you at the old-fashioned bar. Yeah, looking forward to it. And poolside. Going to get that tan going. Yeah. Thank you for watching today. We really appreciate it. Yes, that was a lot of fun. Good to break down linebackers. And like we said, tomorrow we will do edge rushers. In the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment as well. For Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.